The complex multiverse of Bioshock is full of iconic figures that each played their part in bringing chaos to their universe. Within the underwater city of Rapture, there was an artist who, over time, fell into the depths of insanity and sadism, leaving countless victims in his wake. What brought him to Rapture? What atrocities did he commit? And how does his story end? Here we explore in the lore and story behind Sander Cohen. And this week, we're joined by the Bioshock Hub to dive deep into his story. For anyone that enjoys Bioshock content on YouTube, I am sure you have seen this channel pop up, and for those who haven't, go and check out the Bioshock Hub in the description. Anyways, the earliest parts of Sander Cohen's life are shrouded in secrecy. Born into Jewish American heritage, the earliest records of Cohen's life were found in 1937, where he practiced his craft in Marseille, France. In his repertoire, Sander displayed his talents of poetry, sculpting, composing, and the ability to write the odd play. Here, Sander met Martin Finnegan, or it may be better to say that Finnegan met Cohen, where he quickly grew an admiration for Cohen and his artistry. As an artist himself, he became friends with Cohen, where their lives would intertwine for the years to come. Between 1937 and 1945, Cohen had returned to New York City in America and continued his work. Here, he met Andrew Ryan, a wealthy businessman with strong ideals. Cohen was passionate about his work, but was frustrated by his work being censored by the government. In his close group of friends, they began to hear of a utopia that Ryan was developing, a city where the artist would not fear the censor, the scientist would not be bound by petty morality, and where the great would not be constrained by the small. Ryan, like Finnegan, admired Cohen's artistic talent, but also saw his frustration with censorship, and having begun construction on the underwater city of Rapture, he invited him to join in approximately 1946 or 1947. It is unknown which of Sander's creations had been censored, and in turn, left underappreciated by those around him. But when Andrew Ryan offered him a place in his secret utopia, he accepted, along with Martin Finnegan and a few more of his close circle. Many of the smartest minds of Earth subsequently disappeared during this time to begin a new life in Rapture, a moment that would become known as the Vanishing. To tell the story of Sander's early years in Rapture, I'd like to welcome the Bioshock Hub to dive into it.
During the early years of Rapture as a utopian city, Sander, along with two other colleagues, Mimi Tabber and Elgar Vankin, disappeared with Sander to live in Rapture. At this point in time, Sander ranked as one of Rapture's finest. This was a group that was constructed to showcase the elite members of Rapture. Some people that were included in Rapture's finest are as follows: Andrew Ryan, Sander Cohen, Bridget Tenenbaum, Gil Alexander, Sophia Lamb, and Dr. Yi Su-chong. Though these two characters didn't receive any in-game time, they're rather important to establish the fact that Sander did have friends at one point in time. Both of these characters lived in Morocco and eventually moved to New York around the 1945 to 1946 time period, as mentioned in Sky's opening. Unfortunately, while in Rapture, their exact whereabouts are unknown. Before the events of New Year's in 1958, Cohen and Andrew Ryan were very close, as Ryan admired Cohen's artistic vision. During this time, Sander was in control of Fort Frolic, where his artistic genius wouldn't be interrupted or deterred. He produced plays like Patrick and Moira, music which includes Rise Rapture Rise, and countless works of art. Those other works include Bedtime Surprise, Last Dance, Why Even Ask, You Belong to Me, and many others. Well, as Rapture fell into complete chaos, he decided to turn to something a bit drastic to continue his work and keep monetary gain coming in. He would essentially kidnap young girls and traffic them to those who were willing to pay the right price. The majority of them were eventually sold to Ryan Industries to be turned into Little Sisters to keep the flow of Adam coming in. It's pretty messed up if you ask me. During the events of Bioshock 2, we learned that Sander Cohen also helped construct Ryan Amusements. Even though he didn't necessarily get his own hands dirty, he played a key part in making sure Rapture citizens listened to what he and Ryan had to say. Sander was in charge of promoting propaganda to warn other citizens of the dangers of the surface, along with how perfect Rapture was compared to it. Although it isn't explicitly stated what Sander and his disciples did before the bombing of the Kashmir restaurant, it's pretty evident with some of the lines of dialogue that we hear. I believe that all 5 disciples, excluding Elizabeth due to her gender, were relationships between Sander and his disciples and was rather sexual. Whether it was consensual or not, we don't have any evidence to say. However, lines of dialogue include Hector Rodriguez saying, quote, "The things that man had me do," end quote, doesn't paint Sander in the best light. As stated earlier, Elizabeth was technically Sander's 5th disciple, even though she couldn't stand him. He gave her the label of his songbird, which is rather fitting for her due to the events in Colombia. The only reason she stayed around for roughly 2 to 2.5 months was to gain information on Sander, his trafficking of young girls, and the location of Sally. Booker, who decided to try and hide in Rapture and start a new life, thought Sally was dead. Meanwhile, Elizabeth contacts him, knowing the entire truth about himself and about Sally, thus kicking off the events of Burial at Sea.
The attack on the Kashmir restaurant shook Rapture. Sander attempted to go on as normal, but he found that he had someone who despised his and Andrew Ryan's actions, Anna Culpepper. Although Cohen was passionate about his own work, he was viewed by some as a tool to spread Andrew Ryan's propaganda across Rapture. Rapture was built for artists to work in any way they wanted, without limitation, and so Anna took advantage of this where she began to criticize Cohen and Ryan in her own art form, music. Leading up to and throughout this civil war, Andrew Ryan had committed a series of questionable actions that some believed betrayed the very ideals he had created Rapture to uphold. The nationalization of Fontaine Futuristics, the imprisonment of Sophia Lamb, and the continued use of Little Sisters to supply Adam to the deranged splicers and elite of Rapture, to name a few. In her protest, Anna released an album called Ryan's Songbird to criticize Cohen and Ryan's part in the failure of Rapture. In addition to this, she commissioned artwork for this album to anger Cohen, an imitation of Cohen's famous songbird, but instead of his disciple, Elizabeth, she placed a caricature of Cohen in her place. This open attack on Cohen enraged him. The label of Ryan's Songbird and posters with this defamatory caricature of him were placed around Rapture for all to see. In response, Cohen attempted to be civil about the situation, but he later resorted to having as many of Culpepper's posters ripped from the walls, where he stored those he could access in his apartment in Olympus Heights. Regardless of his attempts to maintain this situation, Culpepper continued her attacks on Cohen. Not only did this anger him, but Andrew Ryan could also see the effect her words were having on the population of his city. Tension was rising in an already turbulent civil war. So, Ryan branded Culpepper a communist and assured Rapture that the little red bird would stop singing. And so, shortly after, Ryan fulfilled his promise and Culpepper was murdered by his men. With his rival dealt with, Cohen discovered he had a much greater control of the artistic sector of Rapture, where a new era began for him without the meddling of Culpepper or any that would seek to challenge him. Culpepper's death had been successful in putting fear into the detractors of Cohen and Ryan, and they both took advantage of this situation. In a short era of greatness, Cohen and Fort Frolic became the gem of Rapture, separate from the chaos that filled the streets and the war between Ryan and Atlas. But the war took many victims with it, to the point where Sander Cohen was forced to close Fort Frolic to the public, the place he had called his home and where he had created many great works of art. From now on, the people would not know what his great mind had to offer, and so he grew mad, mostly from his relationship with Adam, just like the rest of Rapture, but increased by his need to share his creations. In this crazed mindset, the disciples who had been with him for all of this time either upset him or left him, but Cohen would have his way with them in the years to come, in his own special artistic way. A fear of his had come to fruition. That coming to Rapture had led to his work not being appreciated in the way he saw fit, where he came to slightly regret his decision in coming to Rapture in the first place. As an incredibly powerful and wealthy figure in Rapture, Cohen was safe from the splicers who roamed the hallowed streets as he had what they needed, and in turn, he commanded them to perform jobs in return for Adam to make his life easier. With isolation in Fort Frolic, an obsession for his craft, and Adam to occupy him, the next few weeks would change Sander Cohen and any who came upon him.
While Jack is exploring his way throughout Rapture with the help of Atlas, Cohen manages to interfere with our radio communication and starts directly talking to Jack. Sander promises Jack to let him out of Fort Frolic. In return, Cohen needs Jack's help to complete his masterpiece, known as his Quadtych. Here's where the precious disciples come into play, that being Martin Finnegan, Hector Rodriguez, Kyle Fitzpatrick, and Silas Cobb. Jack's job is to find each of Cohen's former disciples, kill them, and snap a photo to bring back to his Quadtych. First disciple up is Kyle Fitzpatrick. Sander is essentially tormenting him by making him continuously play a song on the piano and telling him he's not doing it right. If you let Fitzpatrick continue playing, he'll eventually yell at Sander, which then causes that piano to explode. However, if you, as the player, blow up the piano first, you get a brand new line of dialogue from Sander. Next disciple is Martin Finnegan. Jack meets him on the way through Poseidon Plaza and to the other side of Fort Frolic. Once again, Jack kills him, takes a photo, and returns to the main atrium to place that photo in Sander's Quadtych. Third is Hector Rodriguez, who we'll meet in Eve's garden after having a ghostly flashback of what Andrew Ryan did to Jasmine Jolene, but that'll be a different story for another video. After Jack kills Hector, another photo will be taken and placed into the Quadtych. The fourth and final disciple is Silas Cobb. We can find him within Rapture records. After disposing of him, Jack takes the final photo, returns to the Quadtych, and completes it for Sander Cohen. After this, Jack meets Cohen face to face, and Cohen keeps his word by letting Jack leave Fort Frolic. Here's where things get rather interesting. You as the player have two options at this moment. You can allow Sander to live, which you'll receive a small gift from him, and you'll be on your merry way past Fort Frolic. If you choose to do this, you'll see him later in the game inside of his own residence. If you attack and kill him there, the door to his bedroom will open, and you'll be able to access a hidden power to the people machine. If you decide to kill him near his Quadtych, which is option number 2, you won't be able to receive access to that bedroom, and you lose the option to use that power to the people machine.
After his arrival in Rapture, Sander Cohen truly had a place to call home where he could show off his craft to the masses. He created what he wanted without the fear of censorship that the surface had shown him. But with every piece of art, there will always be a critic. Art is subjective, but luckily for Cohen, he was considered one of the best and brightest Rapture had to offer, and with this title, he had the power to silence those who spoke against him. Or, even worse, he used them as pieces of art. Regarded as sadistic by many, Cohen and his ego were boosted and encouraged by Andrew Ryan, and as the Civil War raged on, his influence was felt across the halls of this failed metropolis right until its very end. Sander Cohen was an iconic part of the foundation of Rapture, and now his legacy lives on in this sunken city as a voyeur of questionable taste, regardless of whether Jack decided to keep him alive or kill him. If the ruins of Rapture are discovered by the surface, then just maybe, the artwork that may have survived the fall of Rapture may just go on to keep his memory, or a part of him, alive. Sander Cohen is one of the most iconic characters in the Bioshock series. I remember the first time I visited Fort Frolic and saw the awful things he had done to the residents here. He was obsessed with art and did not care what got in his way to make the perfect masterpiece, and we had to help him to continue with our journey as Jack. Personally, I always took the opportunity to fight and kill him, but I'm sure there are many of you out there that let him live. Putting these videos together does make me think about what the developers of the new Bioshock game are going to place in their game. Characters like Sander Cohen, Yisu Chong and Sophia Lam are so incredibly well written. Even though some are not in the game or are not in the game for long, their impact and actions are felt throughout Rapture, and I hope that the writers of the new game are just as talented as the original ones. I would also like to thank the BioShockHub again for helping out with this video and adding his spin on it. We have different styles of telling a story and I feel like it worked well together. It's my first collaboration for the channel and I wanted it to be a good one. Bioshock is a game so close to my heart, and knowing how much Sander Cohen meant to the BioShockHub, I knew we would do this video right. If you have somehow never heard of him, please go and check out his channel where he has posted some amazing content on the Bioshock series. There's a lot of lore videos, story videos, and he has even interviewed the creators. There's a link to his channel in the description. Now, if you enjoyed this episode, I would appreciate it if you could leave a like and a comment on your thoughts to boost that algorithm. It would help a lot. I would also like to thank my patrons and channel members who are on the screen right now, and an extra special thank you to the gold tier patrons and channel members: Jonas, Lewis, Queen Arby, Fluffy the Dragon, Mr. M791, and Ruben Mendoza. What did you think of this lore? Did you find the twisted life of Sander Cohen interesting? And do you think he was always evil, or did Rapture just have that effect on him? Let me know in the comments below. Now, enjoy your day. Bye.